IBM announced this morning it is buying Confluent, a data streaming company. The company is paying $11 billion in cash. The $31 share price IBM is paying is a 33% premium to what Confluent was trading at on Friday. Joining me now to break it all down is Paul Meeks, head of technology research at Freedom Capital Markets. Hey, Paul, how you doing?
Great, man. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you. So there's a lot going on this week. We'll get to earnings for Oracle and Broadcom in just a second, but what did you make of the IBM Confluent news this morning?
I think it's a smart deal. It's a continued pattern of some acquisitions to build out their footprint in enterprise AI. Like a lot of analysts that are valuation sensitive, I think they paid way too much for it, right? A pretty
Oh,
big premium. Here's a company that is only supposed to do 48 cents earnings per share next year, up from 40 cents this year. So not much EPS growth, and you're paying 65 times earnings. Revenue growth has been good there, but not EPS growth to match. So strategically, I like it. It's a nice product suite. Boy, they're paying a lot.
how much do you think would have been a fair price for Confluent?
Actually, where it was trading on Friday before the big premium markup, I
Right.
think is more than fair. Particularly because it's an all-cash deal, and they are a rather small company, putting themselves in the hand of IBM and IBM's enormous enterprise sales force.
Hmm.
You would expect it to have a nice growth kicker after the deal.
So remind us what exactly Confluent does, and then we'll talk about how IBM sees it strategically fitting in its AI product suite.
So it is going to allow IBM to better manage data streaming, real-time data streaming. And so it's a addition to the product suite. It is another arrow in the quiver. And it makes a lot of sense, as I said.
Right. And tell me a little bit of where IBM these days, I mean, it's a company in many ways that, I mean, they were very early to AI, right? I mean, back in the what was IBM Watson, that was some of the earliest AI that we saw. What's happened to that company in terms of being included in the conversation? I feel like we don't talk about it as much. We know it has a big consulting practice. Where is the company now?
So I actually think it's had a nice renaissance, right? This used to be my grandfather's marquee tech company. It went into the doldrums for a long period of time. Each and every quarter that they reported, their revenues would be down year to year, and that went on for years.
Right.
So, with the relatively new CEO turning the company on a dime and several years ago, essentially pivoting to not the public cloud that everybody else was pivoting to, but a hybrid private public cloud, which actually worked very well with enterprise customers. And so they have seen a nice burst of growth, at least coming from a very sleepy company. They've made some fairly savvy, like maybe this one today, bolt on acquisitions. And they're always going to be somebody that if you are a chief technology officer of a big company, you're always going to look at them. For
Hmm.
decades and decades, they've been marquee in the enterprise, and they're trying to do that here in AI. And of course, they're also working very hard on quantum computing right now.
Hmm. Let's pivot to talking about some news that we have coming up this week. We have Broadcom and Oracle reporting earnings. Let's start with Oracle. What are you watching for with that print?
This one is very sensitive because remember last quarter, they announced this huge revenue backlog, which we find out later on is essentially all OpenAI. And the stock, after they reported, went up a third.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then people said, oh my goodness, they're going to have to spend a lot of money. They're going from generating a lot of free cash flow to burning it. And we'll see if OpenAI is going to be able to pay the bill. And so then the stock collapsed and it went down even lower than what
Hmm.
it was before the announcement. So what I need to see here is I'm not necessarily worried about what they report this quarter for revenue and EPS. I'm sure it'll be fine, but they're going to have to do a couple of things or else they're going to be in some trouble. They're going to have to give us a comfort that this open AI backlog is for real and it
Hmm.
won't be debooked. And also, they're going to have to give us some comfort that at the end of the day, after all this AI infrastructure spending, they are going to go back to generating cash and making a pretty good profit margin,
Hmm.
because that has been the narrative. It went from immediately positive after their last call to horribly negative, and that's where we are here. They're going to have to change the narrative.
Right. It's almost like, look, sometimes you can get away with not listening to the call. You can just read the press release, read the numbers, and get the information you need. This one, I actually think it's the opposite. I think you can probably skip the numbers in some cases. You really got to laser in on what executives say. It's almost like the Federal Reserve statements. I mean, people are going to be really nitpicking in terms of, well, why did they say that? Is that a signal for things going slower?
Yeah, and it's a very good point you make. Like, for example, does it really matter what they report with revenue and EPS? I don't even know if it really matters what they report for their guidance for revenue and EPS. It's going to be long term. Is there going to be a pot of gold at the end of this AI rainbow? And you are super dependent on OpenAI. Is that savvy? We'll see.
Right. Very quickly before we get to Broadcom, what do you think of we've read a lot in the news about the credit default swaps for Oracle having ticked up in price. What do you make of that?
Well, it's obviously a negative, but I don't think that you'll ever have a situation where Oracle, even though it's now stretched, will have any problem paying its debts. I
Right.
think Oracle is going to be fine. Now, you may say, are you spending your money? Are you being smart? That's in question, but I think they'll be just fine, right? Here's a company that they will spend, but they were a prodigious free cash flow generator. And you think about it, if they ever wanted to raise money, Wall Street would be happy to give it to them.
Right. Very quickly, what about Broadcom? What are you watching for there?
So Broadcom will be very interesting because Marvell Technology, its key competitor in essentially designing these XPUs for the hyperscalers, so they're not necessarily beholden to NVIDIA's GPUs. Marvell had a great report, even though the stock's getting hammered today on a Wall Street downgrade. So it'll be incumbent upon Broadcom to do the same, because Broadcom is is valued at a steep premium to Marvell.
Hmm.
And so they're going to have to show that they're really worth it, or I think the valuation gap will close. And so we all know it's going to be good news, but they're going to have to make us feel very good that they are gaining share, particularly against Broadcom, with these hyperscalers to help them design their essentially NVIDIA GPU lookalike chips.
Right. Well, Paul, I want to thank you for coming on. It is a busy week, and so happy Monday to you. Good luck with everything, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Thanks for coming on the show.